I wanted to share a few thoughts around tension, nagging aches and pains, all of that sort of thing. Especially the mysterious ones, the ones that don't go away after, corrective exercise, stretching, yoga, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm up in a tree right now. I've never actually tried to make a video like this of any length in a tree, so, we'll see how it goes. Also, there are going to be cyclists and stuff going by. Trails are busy. So, in order to put this in perspective, it's probably useful to start with the assumption that you're not just a hunk of meat with a brain attached to it. You're a person with, in theory, a pretty rich emotional flavor to your life as well. And what we might think of is that at the very start of your life, the very earliest time that you were you was a single fertilized cell, right? So then that leads to the interesting question. I wonder at what point in your growth and development, as you were developing in the womb or after birth, when you were learning how to walk and crawl and talk, what point in your life do you think that you split into something called a mind and something called a body? Right? That seems a little silly to think of, that at some point as we learn to do all of the things we do, at some point we broke off into mind and body. And yet we tend to live our lives that way. We talk about physical practice that way as well. There's squirrels running by. So let's assume that maybe we're not just mind and not just body, that we're something a little more fundamental than that, something a little more encompassing, a little more holistic. So I would use the word soma for that, or, organism. And I'm going to use those words interchangeably as we go through that. Or I might just say like you, and hopefully you know that what I mean is you, not just the body, you, not just the mind, but you, kind of the mind plus body in its entirety. So if we take that into account, what do you make of these nagging aches and pains? Surely they're not just like a physical thing, right? And of course, maybe you injure yourself, and of course there might be very obvious biomechanical issues for whatever's coming up. But even with those biomechanical issues, I want to work with the assumption that maybe there's a bit more of that mental, emotional component to it as well. And although that might be a difficult pill to swallow or kind of tricky to wrap your head around, I think as we go through this process, you're going to find there's a little bit of truth to that. So another way to think of it is that your body right now, this physical cellular structure, reflects kind of the sum of your life story, of the narrative of you as a person. So you have this kind of body narrative. And the way that you live through your body, how you are, well, we might call that your embodiment. We might say that your embodiment is kind of how you carry yourself. And there's some obvious kind of caricatures or personas we might attach to that. There's the guy whose kind of main way of embodiment is puffing his chest out and walking through life like this. And he's going to interact with the world, and the world's going to interact with him in a very different way than the person who is kind of sunk in and feels like they have the weight of the world on their shoulders. They're going to engage differently, and the world's going to treat them differently in turn. So we think of these as very fixed things by and large, like you are a certain way. And yet you know that at different times in your life and with different people, you are different. Fundamentally, you act differently, you think differently, you feel differently in different places as well. And of course, that's manifested in your body too. Let's say that you're stressed, you're a little strung out at work, your boss is being kind of a dick. You're going to have a very different physical response to that, contrasted with, you at the beach hanging out with your friends, kind of partying on the weekend, whatever that might be. Very different physical feeling. One might be a little more constricting. One might be a little more open, free-flowing. So is it simple enough to then assume that maybe that constricting one has a little bit of muscular tension associated with it? You can kind of see it in my structure too. When I'm constricting, I'm tensing through my musculature at this point. And if I do that chronically over days and weeks and months and years, my body's going to take on a certain shape. Like we all can picture the kind of old person who's just been like beat to shit over the years, weather worn over their entire life, and they're just kind of, they're stuck in this shape. And we think, oh, they're just getting old. But we also probably know maybe a handful of people who in their old age still have kind of that glimmer in their eye. They still have like a definite sign of life to them. They're a little wily, they're with it, they're sharp. So those people got old as well, but they didn't age necessarily. And again, I want to work with the assumption that that's not just a physical thing, it's not just an emotional thing, and it's certainly not just a genetic thing, but it's something about the way we are day to day that shapes us, that influences how we use ourselves, how we squeeze ourselves, how we engage with the world. So I want to try a little experiment with you. And particularly if you've got some areas that, are chronically tense, or different parts of your body that have like nagging injuries, perhaps. Areas where, for better or worse, something's just not quite right. So what I want to do is guide you through a little experiment you might try on. And it's all going to start with awareness. Just present moment awareness. Tuning into what actually is going on with you as a body. Not with the body that you have, but you as a body. And so the easiest way to do that might be to tune in and say, well, right here, right now, I notice my foot's a little tight at this point. It's kind of wedged up there into the tree to hold me upright. Or right here, right now, I'm kind of compressing a bit in my pelvis, so maybe I'll shift a bit. That's uncomfortable. Maybe right here, right now, I notice there's like a tension in my shoulders. So whatever the case may be, simply take a few moments to tune into what you actually notice going on within yourself. Where do you feel your weight underneath you? Or where do you feel tension in different parts of your body? Are there places where you feel particularly supported? Are there places where you feel maybe a sense of spaciousness? And what I'd like you to pay particular attention to are those uncomfortable places within yourself. Places where, again, there's a little tension, maybe a little constricting, maybe a little bracing. For a lot of people, maybe it's in the jaw, or it's in the shoulders, it's in your back. Maybe you feel it down in your hips as well. Wherever it is, we're just going to start to work with this tension. I'm avoiding stepping on ants as I shift my way around, so forgive me. But let's tune into that tension at the start. In that particular part of your body, what's the quality of that tension like? If you notice, for example, that my shoulders are tensing, can you attach maybe like an adjective or descriptor to that? Is that kind of a bracing tension? Or is it a constricting? Do you feel like you're restraining yourself, or is it a binding? And again, we're just going to get a little flowery with the language, a little poetic with the language. We're going to get out of the realm of the biomechanical view and into the realm of you as a truly integrated organism, again, with a rich kind of emotional texture to your life. So that tension that you feel, is it binding, bracing, constricting? Any word you can think of that would bring some extra flavor to that, a little extra oomph to it. And so rather than say, I have tension here, we're going to hold that little quality in mind, and we'll come back to it. But just as an experiment, a little verbal wordplay, could we try reframing that and say, I'm tensing my shoulders? If you notice chronic tension in your shoulders, it's not some external agent that's just like zapping you with tension. Whether you're conscious of it or not, that's you that's tensing. And again, by you, I mean like the soma, I mean the organism, I mean the mind body in its entirety. So it's not some external factor, it's something that maybe even you have some control over, if you learn how to control it. So just try that on for size and see what that's like. I'm tensing my shoulders. Does that ring true at all? How does that feel to say that? Again, with this experimental part, we're just kind of listening in to see, oh yeah, I am tensing my shoulders. And here's the cool thing. Even if it's subconscious tension that maybe you don't realize you're doing to yourself all the time, as soon as you can start to get the hint that, oh, I'm tensing myself, it's almost like you give yourself permission to stop tensing yourself. Awareness is the first step there. And agency can come from that kind of ownership of that body process of tension. So, what's that like? I'm tensing myself. Or, if you've got an ache or a pain, I'm hurting myself. What comes up for you when you say that? What kind of physical sensations come up? What kind of emotions or thoughts or feelings? And maybe, you're looking through all of this. You're trying this out and you're saying, that's stupid. That's not worth paying attention to. That's bullshit. What's it like to then say, I think it's bullshit to pay attention to myself. I don't think it's worth my time to pay attention to myself. Or it's a little silly to pay attention to myself. What's that like? So, what we're essentially doing here is almost wrangling in these projections that we've cast out there of tension, of some objectification of our bodies, our selves here, our entire being. When we bring awareness to those aches, those pains, that tension, when we start to take ownership over them, we give ourselves a little more choice. We give ourselves a little more flexibility. We start to kind of restore some of the fundamental dignity of the human organism. Because you're not just some workhorse, you're not just some object, you're not just some thing that is tense. You're a living, breathing organism that is tensing itself for whatever reason. Again, we don't need to explain too much of these reasons quite yet. It's not part of this experiment. We'll get there. So, after you've started to reclaim ownership of some of this body process, some of this phenomenon of tension within yourself, this is where it's going to get really weird, by the way. What I invite you to do is maybe give that part of your body a voice. And again, it's just an experiment. We're trying it on for size to see what comes up for us, to see whether or not it rings true. This is not by any means like a one-size-fits-all, definitely going to solve all your problems kind of thing. It's an experiment. This is you learning about yourself, about your mind-body process, and how that works. So, for example, for the longest period of time, years and years, I had this nagging tension in my hip. Whoa, interesting bug down there. This nagging tension in my hip that just wouldn't go away. And I thought it came from an injury in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Maybe that was the thing that triggered it, that was kind of the inciting incident in the narrative of Chandler Stevens as a body. I had this tension that just wouldn't go away, despite all the stretching, despite all the corrective exercise, despite all the strengthening, all the yoga, all of the little banded exercises and stuff. It just didn't work. And what really started to click things into place for me was when I started to give my hip a voice. When I made the shift from thinking that my body is something that I have to some process that I am. And again, that can be a weird thing to kind of wrap our heads around, but what I started to work through was a process of saying, okay, I don't just have a hip. I maybe am a hip in some way, or my hip is some part of me. So again, that can be really tricky to wrap our heads around, but the dialogue that started to come up from this was, I'm Chandler's hip, and I'm tense. I feel like I can't let go. And I thought, well, oh, that's interesting. Go figure. I was a little high strung at the time too. There was just I wasn't the best at parties, we'll put it that way. So the more I got into this kind of body narrative process, I really kind of let myself go with it, and I gave myself a voice through my hip. So it's something like, I'm Chandler's hip and I'm tense. I'm afraid to let go. I just can't seem to let myself relax. And I wonder why. Well, why? Because if I let myself go, I'm going to get hurt. I got hurt once before, and if I really let myself open up, I'm going to get hurt again. That last time I got hurt, it was brutal. I couldn't handle it. And so it's not comfortable to be here, but I'm going to close myself off because that feels safer than really letting myself be open, letting myself be free, letting myself move around a bit more and feel something. I mean, at times I feel like in all this tension, I'm just kind of dead. I feel dead. There's nothing really going on there. And yeah, that's not fun. That's not the way I want to be, but it's better than being hurt. And you might just think, if that weren't my hip talking, if that were me talking, what do you think that reveals about me as a person? What does that show about the narrative structure of my life so far? What does that show about my emotional state too? So whatever nagging kind of body stuff you have going on, giving it a voice can reveal some of the inner workings within ourselves. There's somatic educator Bonnie Bainbridge-Cohen. She developed this process of body-mind centering. And she says it beautifully when she puts it this way. She says, if you want to tell which way the wind is blowing, watch the sand. And our bodies are the sand. We've got a lot of sand here. So if we want to know what's going on internally in the mental process, in our emotional well-being, well, our bodies are going to tell us quite a bit. If we observe, if we listen, if we start to sense and experience, and then we can take it further and actually give it voice. So what's it like to give voice to those nagging tensions you have? What's it like to give voice to that repeat injury that you keep getting? For example, I've got a client I've been working with. He's dealing with chronic pain, and it's in his back primarily. And one of the first things he said to me was, yeah, I feel like my back isn't supported. I feel like it's working too hard. It can't get in a break. It can't catch a break. And I said, well, that's interesting. What's it like to try on for size? I need some support. I can't do it on my own. I can't catch a break. I'm at the end of my wits trying to get all of this stuff together. And he paused and go figure, that clicked something into place. There's another person I've been working with who kind of had back pain for the longest time, and back pain, go figure, that's a revealing. It's like I feel like I can't trust my back. I feel like my back is just at the moment's notice gonna like stab me, like it's gonna hurt. When I'm feeling good, when I'm trying to demonstrate some stuff in front of clients or whatever, my back's just gonna like pull the rug out from under me. I can't trust it. And he started to talk through this process again, giving his back voice and saying, yeah, just when you're feeling good, I'm gonna dig that in. And he started to laugh as he said it too. It was interesting. His back had this kind of almost manipulative tendency, like, yeah, I'm gonna let you build yourself up, and then I'm just gonna dig it in. I'm gonna make you hurt. I'm gonna make you feel fragile and broken. And as he was owning this, he felt really uncomfortable. He was like, it doesn't feel good to say that. And so I should clarify. This isn't necessarily a comfortable process. Part of what we're doing when we talk through body narrative and body process is we're wrangling back in the parts of ourselves that feel foreign. Because if something feels foreign, if it doesn't feel like a part of us, we dissociate from that. And in the body, what tends to happen right away is tension. Frozen shoulder is a shoulder that you don't own. Or a chronically stiff back is a back that, for whatever reason, your brain, your mind doesn't quite recognize as a part of you. And so we create tension around that area. So when we start to get back into this process, when we start to weave together these parts of ourselves, it can be really uncomfortable, both physically and emotionally. You might learn some things about yourself that have been kind of swept under the rug or put in the closet for a long, long time. But I feel like if we want to get back into the fullness of the human experience, that's something we just have to do. We have to find this integration. We have to find this wholeness. We have to bring back in these parts of ourselves, the physical, the emotional, the mental. We have to bring those in the things that we've just cast off for so many years. So, the other thing you might think of, and again, this is just a different way of thinking about this process. It's something that's come up quite a bit in the last few days, last few weeks as well with some clients of mine. We think about what our bodies, reveal about kind of the internal workings of ourselves. And your posture, the way you carry yourself in gravity, is so revealing in that sense. So think of it this way. You probably know after a long day of work this feeling of just kind of collapsing into yourself. And if you stay collapsed, if you try and keep yourself upright, that's exhausting. That's going to lead to all sorts of chronic tension, all sorts of just aches and pains, and just, it's a terrible way to be. So what do so many of us do? When we feel ourselves collapsing, we prop ourselves up. We kind of force ourselves to stay with whatever it is we're doing. Even when our body is giving us a signal like, tap out, I've got nothing left. Even when our bodies are just sinking, giving up, we prop ourselves up. It's like we feign interest. We want to stay interested, or we want to appear interested or engaged in whatever's going on. But this isn't engaged. There's something going on over there. Or similarly, if someone's got their arm out and they're kind of propping when they're sitting on the ground or sitting in a chair, they prop themselves up this way. This is not a supported way of being. It's not an effective way of engaging in the world. This arm's unaccounted for. It's busy holding you up. Contrast that with, if I can find real support within my own structure, where I actually feel that my kind of postural or my organizational muscles are on, and I'm freely able to engage in the world. I'm not collapsing. I'm not propping myself up, but I'm actually just kind of relaxed into my center, relaxed into my support. This is a much more effective way of being. But it's not a way that we can be all the time, right? We have very limited resources. We have limited calories we can expend, limited attention we can give to the world, so it's natural to collapse. And so, rather than prop yourself up or just sit there collapsing, what's it like to just give up and just let yourself go down a layer in terms of, elevation? If you find yourself just sinking there, checking out mentally, checking out physically, what's it like to give up and just lay down? Lay down for a minute, 2 minutes. Maybe as you're watching this, you find that, I've got this going on. Give up, lay down, get on the ground. Essentially what you're doing is withdrawing into a place where you feel some support. And then coming back up and starting to engage with the world. If we're go, go, go all the time, of course we're going to run out of energy and have to prop ourselves up in all of this. This is me fighting what my body wants to do. My body's saying, just lay down, just yield into gravity more. Give yourself up a bit. You don't have to hold yourself upright all the time. So that's just another obvious cue your body might be giving you. What does your posture say about your kind of organismic reserves at this point? What does it say about your attention, your energy, your level of engagement? Again, if I'm propped here, I'm not ready to engage with the world around me. My level of engagement is going to be severely limited. As a shortcut, we might think that our arms are here to engage. They're there to reach out. They're there to pull in. They're there to carve or to break or to rip or to rend or to make, to weave and sew. Our arms and our hands are engaging things. And our legs are supporting or moving things. But if we find that we start using our arms to support ourselves, that's a sure sign that we are not actually able to engage at the level we're pretending to engage in. So again, that's just another way of thinking about this kind of body process, this embodiment, this organismic wholeness, this mind-body unity. What are the things that your body is saying to you? And what can you do to start to tune into that a bit more? What can you do to start to respect that way of knowing, that whole world of information? It's not mental exactly, it's not cognitive, but it's real, it's true. So I hope this has been useful. I hope it's shed some light on different ways you might think about some of these things, different ways you might think about tension, pain, about the signals your body is sending you. Again, your body isn't some foreign entity. It's not like you're some mind just controlling a body. Fundamentally, you're whole. You're an integrated organism. And the more we can get back to that, the richer life gets. So I'm curious, try some of those processes out. Leave a comment down below or over there, wherever this video ends up. Send me your thoughts. Let me know what this brings up for you. And if you want more support in a process like this, feel free to reach out as well. I work with people around the world in work exactly like this, connecting the dots between mind and body and environment, connecting the dots between the different aspects of your experience and really filling in the gaps to help you tap into the wholeness of yourself for whatever kind of work it is you want to do in the world. I love that stuff. So again, don't be a stranger. Reach out. Let me know what kind of questions this brings up for you. I'll talk to you again soon.